Okay. So you can see my screen?
Yes.
Great. I think the live stream is working here. We'll get started. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Jayashree, mute.
Oh, sorry.
Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vritavarshini Bhagavati Ashtadashadhyayini Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamayah Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrutaduhe Namaha. Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are almost coming towards the end of the 4th chapter, hoping that another 2 or 3 classes, 2 classes, I think we should be done with 4th chapter here. We have covered a number of very interesting topics. Literally, it has transported us from the sense of who we think we are and how we act in this world, which is as me, this person, this physical self. And in this chapter, today we are entering to this aspect of how that self-knowledge, which is the ultimate of all knowledge, will allow us to understand not only the fact that I am not this body, mind, and intellect, that they are only my instruments. And the second thing is my oneness with that Paramatman. That aspect of it, today we are going to see.
In the Satam Varudilla, Priya.
1 second. Let me try to mute.
Priya.
Muted Amma, but
the volume.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Okay, so Usha says, how is the audience for everyone? It's good? Okay. Okay, so
It's a little low.
The volume is low, but we could hear though.
Okay, I don't know why. I'm not sure if I should do something on my side. Is it better now? Better? Minu, is it okay for you? Minu, is that okay for you?
No, it's very, very low.
Very low. Okay. Okay. I don't know what.
Stable.
Let's see. Is there speaker thing? HP. Is it better now? Is it better now? Okay. Okay, great. Okay, let me.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So I don't know what happened there. Thank you, Usha, for pointing that out. So we have covered pretty much all the different yajnas. And the whole idea about these yajnas were about how I can actually dissolve this sense of who I think I am, you know. So in this sense, you see all the yajnas that were mentioned. And the part of what I think I am is this ego, right? The minute I think I'm Sunitha, all the other koshas connected with the Sunitha comes into being. And then I tend to lose that sense of my true identity. So these yajnas have been devised as a form of sadhanas, where each of these sadhanas, I'm actually dissolving my ego. I'm offering my ego in the fire of knowledge. So that was the aspect which actually was discussed in all of them. So then the question comes is, if I'm offering in the fire of knowledge, what is that knowledge? And that is why the coming shlokas for today is going to really talk about how to obtain that self-knowledge and how that knowledge is really the permanent solution for, you know, the problems that we face in life. That is the aspect which we will see here. And how this knowledge is so forgiving. I mean, this knowledge, number one, not only is it available for everybody, but it is also extremely forgiving. Even the most worst of all human beings, you can say, you know, even the most, you know, he would have done a lot of stealing, killing, all this, even for such a person, if that person just comes in contact with this knowledge, then that knowledge is actually the most purifying thing. Like in Bhajagovindam, there is this shloka, you know, Kurute Ganga Sagara Gamanam Vrita Paripalana Mathava Danam. In that, he says, you know, you may go to Ganga, you may go to read a lot, but ultimately, all that can purify you, no doubt, and we have to do it. But the most purifying thing is this knowledge. So that is that's the aspect here. And then, you know, how do you really obtain this knowledge? And the glory of the knowledge actually is talked about. So this is all the shlokas which is coming up, ending with 42, which will be the last shloka. So we will chant shlokas 24 to 33 today. Atha chaturtodhyayah Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam Brahmaiva tena gantavyam Brahma karma samadhina Devameva pare yajnam Yogina paryupasate Brahmagnava pare yajnam Yajnenaivopajuhvati Shrotraadinindriyanyanye Sanyamagnishu juhvati Shabdadin vishayananye Indriyagnishu juhvati Sarvan indriya karmani Prana karmani chapare Atma sanyama yogagnau Juhvati jnana dipite Dravya yajnastapo yajnaha Yoga yajnastatha pare Swadhyaya jnana yajnascha Yataya samshita vrataha Apane juhvati pranam Prane panam tatha pare Pranapani gati rudva Pranayama parayanaha Apare niyata haraha Pranan praneshu juhvati sarvepyete yajna vidaha yajna kshapita kalmashaha yajna shishtamrita bhujaha yanti brahma sanatanam nayam lokostya yajnasya kutonya kuru sattama evam bahuvida yajnaha vitata brahmano mukhe karmajan vidhitan sarvan evam jnatva vimokshase shreyan dravyamayat yajnat jnana yajna parantapa sarvam karmakhilam partha jnane parisamapyate. So this was the last shloka that we saw last time, where in this shloka, there are two things mentioned. One is he's talking about how, so far, all the yajnas that have been mentioned from, up to about 32, they all are basically sacrificing some material things. And many times the sacrifice of these material things is for gaining something higher. So this is what was discussed before, but now he says in the second line, which is jnana yajna parantapa. He says that knowledge, it is not sacrifice of knowledge, but sacrifice in knowledge. That is the way you have to understand this part. Sacrifice in knowledge, that one is the ultimate one. And I think a little bit, we had a discussion last week about what do we mean by even sacrifice of knowledge, right? So that's the question that Sriram had asked. And I think Pradeep and everyone explained also very beautifully, which is, we could look at it as that if we at all, we have to give something to somebody, then, simpler way of looking at it is that at least I can give knowledge. Knowledge is something that is in, with everybody. In this regard, there was just one simple thing I read 2 days ago, It was about how somebody who was traveling in a bus, in India, this person noticed that, the bus was very crowded and he was looking for a seat to sit. And pretty soon, next to another guy, a seat opened. And the person standing next to a seat, very generously allowed this person to sit in that seat. And then this person was noticing about how this person who gave the seat never really sat at all. He would always give his seat to somebody or the other. And, this guy then asked him, why is it that you're always giving this seat to somebody you're not sitting? He said, when I give the seat to somebody, then that person, when he says just thank you to me, that itself is more than enough for me. So at the end of the day, I may not have a lot of things to give. I may not have money to give. I may not have anything, but at least I can offer that seat which I was supposed to sit to somebody. And from that, I get my happiness. So there are so many ways that people give different things. Now, for this guy, the one of offering that simple seat was enough, and that gave him happiness. That was a form of yajna for him. And so too here, like we discussed last time, giving just simple knowledge itself is yajna. But here, what is really emphasized is that ultimate yajna, which is ultimate knowledge itself. So that is what everything that we are offering has to culminate in that absolute knowledge. So we may do any amount of karmas, any amount of actions, even selfless action, we may do it completely, but ultimately that has to culminate in that self-knowledge which is trying to tell me that I am not this body, mind, intellect. I'm not the Sunitha. I am that absolute Brahman. That is the self-knowledge. And it is in that knowledge that all actions have to dissolve. And that is why he's saying it culminates in knowledge. So ultimately, the purpose of all this is nothing but Chitta Shuddhi and Chitta Ekagrata. So Chitta Shuddhi meaning purity of mind, and focus, Ekagrata, Chitta Ekagrata meaning really the single-minded focus. Ultimately, that is what all of them are supposed to lead to. And that is where we are going towards. So the next few verses, almost the 9 verses, is actually going to give us the benefit. Why is the self-knowledge is needed? So it is not just, we're going to talk about the glory of self-knowledge, because ultimately, you know, whenever we want something, we want to know why. Why do I need it? What is so exciting about this knowledge, right? So this is basically moving. So in 4th chapter, it is all about just whetting our appetite and just telling us about how precious this knowledge is. And sorry, Shloka. Yeah, I want to make sure I covered that. Yeah. So this shloka, you know, which is basically trying to tell you about not just the glory of it, but also very, very interestingly, it tells you about what are the qualifications that is needed. And also most important is that we have to want this knowledge. You know, we have to really want it. So, you know, even if, for example, the guru comes and tells you, okay, I'm going to give you this knowledge, it won't have an impact until I feel in my own self that I want this. So even in Bhagavad Gita, right, we have we have Krishna and Arjuna who have been together, who have been boyhood friends. They've been together, everything. But Arjuna never really asked for that knowledge, you know, until he actually asked for it. Krishna also said, okay, if you want me as a friend, I'll be your friend. But if you want me as a guru for this knowledge, only then I will give it to you. And actually, there are many examples in our scriptural literature. Even in the Upanishads, there is this story of Shvetaketu and Uddalaka. So Shvetaketu is the son, and you know, Uddalaka is the father. And until the son really told his dad, you know, please teach me, the dad never really gave the knowledge. So showing how the want of the student is very important. So that is why this shloka is giving about 3 qualifications of the student. And it is also giving the qualification of the teacher, who is really a teacher, who can actually give you this knowledge. So we chanted the shloka last time. Tat vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninaha tattva darshinaha. So tat vidhi. Tat vidhi. Vidhi means know. Tat, that. So if you want to know that, you have to do what? Pranipatena. That is long prostration. Pranipatena. And 2 more things. Pariprashnena. You have to inquire. You have to question. And then you have to do also sevaya. You have to do service. 3 things. So long prostration, question, and we will go in detail about each one of this, you know. Then upadekshanti te jnanam. Upadekshanti te jnanam. You will be instructed in that knowledge. By whom? By the teachers, by the ultimate teachers. Jnaninaha, tattva darshinaha. So here we have Jnaninaha, who is the wise people, but why and how are they called a jnani? Because they have actually experienced it. So not only are they, a teacher who can teach, but they are actually having experienced it. So that is the shloka here. And let's see the meaning of each one of them, very important. So pranipatena, so here it means by long prostration. So there are two upasargas here, pra and ni. And I think for those of you who remember the Sanskrit thing and who are doing Sanskrit, upasargas many are, those prefixes which are added to the actual verb here to emphasize here. So ni means down, like Upanishad. In Upanishad we have the ni. Same thing here. The ni means down, and pra means well. Very well done. For that word pra is used. And pata means to fall. So pra plus ni plus pata, pranipatena. This means to fall down really, really well. So that means to like sashtanga namaskar, falling totally flat on the ground in surrender. So here the surrender is like totally complete here. And it's actually, the whole idea here is it's a very symbolic gesture. It's a symbolic gesture to say that, oh Guru, I have come here completely. I've totally surrendered myself. All my 8 limbs are touching on the ground. When we say 8, all the 7 plus the mind. Sometimes we may do all the physical actions, but my mind will be somewhere at the back. It's like, okay, I'm doing it. Sometimes when we ask our children, somebody, our Swami comes at home and we say, why don't you do namaskar? They'll say, okay, mom, I'll do it. And they may do it. But, in the mind, they've totally not yet completely accepted it, right? So here, pranipatena, and that's why this picture, I think, totally gives you that idea of all the 8 limbs, dirgha, sashtanga namaskar. When we do this, it totally gives you that idea of humility. So first of all, we may say that when I'm surrendering, I get the humility, but actually it is with humility when I'm totally surrendering myself. The idea is my mind is completely given to the Guru, and we are asking the Guru, you take it, you clean it, and you give it back to me, completely surrender. So that is the whole idea of the complete surrender, pranipatena. So there's this beautiful phrase, vidya dadhati vinayam. So only when I have that complete knowledge will I gain that humility. And with that, it's a catch-22. If I have the humility, I get the knowledge. But when I get the knowledge, I become completely humble. I totally understand that, there's only so little that I really know, and there's so much more that I need to know. So therefore, oh Guru, please, I'm surrendering totally. So that's why this pranipatena is such an important word here. That is total surrender, keeping in mind that I have recognized that the Guru will teach me totally. Only when my ego is completely dissolved can I accept something, right? I remember reading Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer gives this example about how, this professor, he goes into this professor of a big university in US, who is heading the philosophy department of Buddhism or something. He goes all the way to India, and then he goes to Tibet and he meets this really famous monk. And while he's sitting with this monk, and he actually wants to learn from this monk about Buddhism. But then as soon as he sits there, he starts to talk to him about everything that he knows. And this monk, pours some tea for him. And pretty soon, this professor notices that when the monk is pouring the tea is overflowing from the cup. And so, the professor is asking the monk, why are you pouring all this tea so much? It's just overflowing. So the monk is telling him that, you have so much in your head that there is no room for me to give you anything more. So that overflowing, his mind, the professor's mind is already so full of technical knowledge, but he doesn't have the ability to gain that self-knowledge yet because his mind has to be cleaned up. So pranipatena is, when I go to a guru, a monk, I don't show him everything that I know, but I'm there to receive the knowledge. So that is why this word pranipatena is very beautifully given as a word which is long prostration, dirgha namaskar, complete surrender to that guru. The next one, which is pariprashnena. Pariprashnena. Another such a beautiful concept in Vedanta. The whole idea is don't accept anything blindly. Question, question, question. The idea is bring out every doubt what is there in your mind. And so the guru, literally orders a student, make sure you question this. Make sure that this is totally available for you. Give that intellect a complete freedom to question this. How many, this is not a judgment on any religion or anything, but how many such faiths really ask for this? How many of them would say, question everything, just come to me. Like, for example, in Vivek Chudamani, those of you who are attending Vivek Chudamani, where the student goes to the teacher and he says, Ko nama bandhaha, ko katamesha agataha, what is bondage? What is liberation? What is avidya? He asks that 7 questions, and the teacher is very willing to, answer this totally. Anything, there is no such thing as a stupid question, as they say, right? Everything is a valid question. So it is pariprashnena, again, by completely, totally questioning the teacher, only then the knowledge can dawn. So pariprashnena is again another word, beautiful word. Third qualification, sevaya. So here again, seva doesn't mean, taking a lot of fruits and sweet meats and, the desserts or whatever for the guru. And I remember this beautiful story, incident of Swami Tapovan Maharaj. So Swami Tapovan Maharaj apparently, used to have this classes for this for the brahmacharis, and once there was one devotee of Swami Tapovan who came from the city to the Himalayas to see him, and when he came there, he actually brought him a lot of different sweets, different kind of milk sweets and everything. So the brahmacharis who had not seen such sweets for a long time was waiting for the class to begin, to end, so that Swami Tapovan would, distribute the sweets. But Swami Tapovan, as soon as he knew what was happening in the brahmachari's mind, he said, go and throw the sweets in the Ganges, So the idea being that it is not ultimately, when you do it is, the seva has to be at a very different level here. The seva of but here, what I wanted to bring out more importantly is, it is not the flowers and it's not the sweets and everything that is the seva to the master, but it is much, much more than that. It is the tuning of the disciple to the master. And that is done in many ways. It is not just done by massaging of the guru's feet or anything like that. It is truly complete tuning. That is, even before the master would need something, before the teacher would need something, the student already knows and is there to serve the master. That is true service. Like Guruji always say, and Swami Chimananda gives this example of, how in a broadcast, I mean, now of course we don't do it. I don't know if there is even a good analogy. In the olden days, I want to say olden days because we all have gone through this. When you're trying to, when radios were there and we used to tune it to a particular station to get the Vivid Bharati or anything to listen to the songs, until you hit that exact point, you cannot really listen to the song completely, right? So that is the fine tuning. First, you adjust the major tuning, then you fine tune it to get the right music. So too, here, Sevaya is that tuning of the mind to the Guru. And when that tuning happens, the knowledge flows very easily. And the knowledge always flows from a higher level to a lower level. And that seva is very important. So these three adjustments are absolutely necessary for us in order to, in the case of self-knowledge. Now, this may not be necessary in the case of our regular knowledge that we study in universities. In universities, if I have to study chemistry or economics or anything, you don't necessarily have to do this seva, right? Matter of fact, you pay your tuition fees, you can get to the best university and you can choose the right, the best professor. That is more, so you don't need that. And you don't need to have the prostration. You don't have to surrender completely. So, but of course you can question, that questioning is always there, but in self-knowledge, all these three things are important. That is as far as the student is concerned. Now, coming to the qualification of the teacher. So he says, Jnaninaha Tattva Darshinaha. So such a person, the two most important factors is the person has to have a perfect knowledge of the literature. Perfect knowledge, to be able to recognize, even by looking at that one Sanskrit word, what exactly is it really conveying. So, typically in scriptures, we always say there are two kinds of teachers. One is the Acharya. Acharya meaning one who has a great knowledge of the scriptures. Okay, that is a person who can teach really well. But then there is somebody called the Guru. The Guru is a person who not only knows all this literature, but who actually has experienced whatever he or she is trying to communicate. So complete experience of the reality. That is ultimately the Guru. So this Guru can actually take this darkness out of us, or this ignorance. And what is that ignorance? It is that ignorance that I am ignorant of the fact that I am that Brahman. So that person, Guru, is the only one who can actually take the darkness away. And that is the qualification that is required. So that is why he is a Jnaninaha. Jnaninaha. And such a person is, when I say has experience, he is a Brahmanishta. He's a Brahmanishta. So he's not only a Shrotriya Brahmanishta. Shrotriya means the person who can actually teach from the Shrutis, Shrotriya, but he is a Brahmanishta. So that is the qualification of a Jnani. So what happens when you have this knowledge? When I gain this knowledge, I have complete contentment. I have ultimately recognized that I don't have to go around in this world seeking happiness from the objects. I don't have to think about seeking happiness from relationships. That doesn't mean that I don't have to have a relationship. I do have to, I recognize I'm living in this world with everyone, and relationships are important from that point of view, but I'm not seeking for any, what should I say, the word is approbation, right, in English word, which is I'm seeking for praise, or I'm seeking for somebody to say that I love you, you know, all the time. I'm not seeking that anymore at all, because I am totally fulfilled in that knowledge as to who I really am, and the fact that that happiness which I'm seeking for, that bliss, that joy, all that is me myself. So 3 examples actually has been, it's not given in this verse, but Guruji gives a beautiful, very nice example. He says about how, just like a cloth, you know, a cloth doesn't have to search for cotton or the thread. The thread or the cotton is woven throughout the cloth material, right? So, or even a wave doesn't have to go searching for the ocean. You know, so too a jiva doesn't have to go searching for Brahman or that knowledge. That knowledge is me, myself. That aspect of it is obtained, and that is the knowledge which only a guru will be able to give that. And that is why this seeking a guru is needed, because we can read books, we can read many, because many people say that, you know, I read a lot of books, or maybe I even look at a lot of YouTube videos. All that is great, but ultimately nothing like the aspect of a physical guru who can really understand my mind and give me the knowledge which will be said in such a way that only I can understand. So the guru understands the student for the students where the student is and give that. So that is why this is mentioned here about what is the qualification of the guru and the qualification of the student. So this is it's an important shloka from that point. But the next shloka which is coming up is actually a Mahavakya. And it is a Mahavakya which really tells you about the union, about who I am, and how, you know, not only the fact that I am none other than Brahman, but it is in Brahman that all these beings reside. So that is the aspect that we'll see in the next shloka. Yajñātvā na punar moham, Yajñātvā na punar moham, evam yasyasi pandava, evam yasyasi pandava, yena bhutanyasheshena, yena bhutanyasheshena, Drakshasyatmanyatho mayi, Drakshasyatmanyatho mayi, Yajñātvā na punar moham, evam yasyasi pandava, yena bhutanyasheshena, Drakshasyatmanyatho mayi. So he says, knowing that knowledge, never again shall delusion, that is na punaha, punaha means again, moham or delusion, evam yasyasi pandava, will ever cloud your mind. So that is to say, today we are leading almost a kind of a, we are living in delusion, right? So, yajñātvā, having realized that, Krishna is assuring Arjuna, oh Arjuna, you will never ever be ever confused. Not only will you be ever confused about your duty, but you will not be confused ever about anything in life. So, yena bhutani asheshena. Asheshena means without any doubt whatsoever. Completely, you are going to be rid of this delusion by this knowledge. Yena bhutani asheshena drakshyasi atmani yat athomayi. So, you will recognize not only your identity with me, Brahman, with who you are, but you will see that all the beings, all living beings shall you see in yourself and in me. So this is again the most important shloka here in chapter 4, because the first time, I mean, in second chapter, we saw a lot of the theory part of it, but here Krishna is trying to tell him about how that you are none other than that Atman. And that is why he's saying, drakshasi atmani athomayi. You will see in yourself and in me. So the same beings that you might see in Krishna, you're seeing in yourself too. That is to say, the identity of Arjuna and Krishna is the same. So nothing but Krishna is no different than Arjuna. So that aspect of it is important to recognize in this shloka, and that is why it is called as a Mahavakya. A Mahavakya is a Mahavakya, or a great sentence, or the most powerful sentence. So like, for example, we have the 4 Mahavakyas, right? We have Tattvamasi, Ayamatma Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, Prajnanam Brahma. Those are all Mahavakyas. But here in Bhagavad Gita, also that same Mahavakya is reflected in these shlokas. And therefore, this particular shloka is called as a Mahavakya, because Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna that, Arjuna, you have that oneness with me, with Paramatma. And when you have that oneness, you will recognize that all the beings, and that is why he's saying, Bhutani, yena Bhutani asheshena drakshasi atmani athomayi. You will see all these beings in me. So if you, not only in me, that is in Krishna, but in you also. And when you see that, the oneness is established, and that is why it is called as a Mahavakya. Now, why is this important? Why should I know that it is a Mahavakya? And what is the idea behind it? The idea behind it is that when I know that all the beings are only me, then why would I ever be afraid of anything? That is the idea. So I recognize my oneness with everyone. So there is no need for me to be afraid of anybody. I'm totally fearless. And when I'm totally fearless, I'm actually completely, even that fearlessness can come only when I'm totally contented too, right? So that is exactly why this is a Mahavakya, and this knowledge is so very important for all of us to gain this thing. Because as you know, Arjuna was really afraid of things. He did not see the oneness with everyone. And therefore, he had to go to Krishna. And therefore, Krishna's highest teaching is this aspect that, Arjuna, you're no different than anybody. All the beings that you see are in you. That is why I'm saying, Drakshasi Atmani Temayi. You're actually seeing everyone in you. And that is why this is a Mahavakya. Any question on this aspect? Any thought on to? So then in the shloka, you see another beautiful aspect, which is what is removed out here is Arjuna's complete moha or delusion. So that is completely removed here. And this delusion for all of us can actually be removed many times only through this self-knowledge, which can be gained by all these Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, which we say. That is the only way that is the absolute cure for us to remove this ignorance. So for us, we are now in this Arjuna disease, so to speak, Arjuna disease, which is this disease of delusion or disease of ignorance, we might say. That is what has been totally can be removed, is what Krishna is assuring Arjuna about this. So then if that is removed, something has to be added, right? So what is really being added? Actually, nothing is added. Nothing is added because the ignorance, when it is removed, what I am shines forth. And again, Viveka Chudamani, there is a beautiful shloka about this moss, it comes much later in the verses. It's about the moss that is, when you go to the sea or something, you see this dark green moss, which, is hiding this clear water below. When you remove the moss, you see the clarity of the water, right? So that's the same thing for us. My ignorance is actually causing this delusion in me, and that delusion is preventing my oneness to be seen. So that part of it is actually removed, and therefore that is being shown. So nothing is really added. I'm not gaining any knowledge. So that is the thing that needs to be remembered about the self-knowledge, is nothing is really, we're not gaining a knowledge. It's not like when I go to the university, I gain this knowledge to do something, but scriptures are basically trying to say that you are ultimately that. You just have to do the required practices, which is again the Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. When I do that, then I recognize my true self. Which now brings us to the Shloka number 36, where Krishna is now trying to give the glory of this knowledge, about how wonderful this knowledge is, and how acquiring this will totally give you that sense of fulfillment, contentment, everything. And how, of course, like we said, it takes you away from delusion and everything. Api chetasi papebhyah, api chetasi papebhyah, sarvebhyah papakrittamaha, sarvebhyah papakrittamaha, sarvam jnanaplavenaiva, sarvam jnanaplavenaiva, vrajinam santarishyasi, vrajinam santarishyasi, api chetasi papebhyah, sarvebhyah papakrittamaha, sarvam jnanaplavenaiva, vrajinam santarishyasi. So here he's saying that this knowledge is so great and so forgiving that even the worst of all human beings is eligible for this knowledge. Even the most, the worst kind of human beings can actually get this knowledge. So api indicating that, even if there is chet, api chet is actually a very standard phrase that is used in the Sanskrit discussions, So api chet asi papebhyah. So even if there happens to be among people a sinner, and not just a sinner, sarvebhyah papakrittamaha. Krittamaha. Tamaha means here, papebhyah krittamaha means the like, we say the best of the bestest or something. Here, the worst of the worst kind of people, sarvebhya, among people, even in the most worst of them, even for such a person, sarvam jnana plave naiva. By this boat or raft, plava means boat, boat of jnanam. By this boat of knowledge, vrijinam sam tarishyasi, that even for such a person who has this one, such a person is also eligible to cross over this sea of delusion. That is what he's trying to say here. So even if you are the greatest sinner, even for such a person, if you happen to get this knowledge, that knowledge will actually take you across. So he says, Arjuna, don't get disheartened. Even, if you think you're not able to get this knowledge, don't worry. Not just you, but even somebody even worse than probably what you are, you can still cross over by this knowledge. So ultimately, this is the ultimate way by which one can get that absolute moksha. And that is, we have seen examples of people in, say, even Valmiki, for example. Valmiki was a robber, Ratnakar. But even for somebody like him, when he came in touch with this knowledge, it just totally transformed him. And, we saw the great Ramayana that came from him. So now the question is, how does this knowledge, okay, I understand that this knowledge can reach even to the worst of sinners, but how does this knowledge really destroy the sin? And that is what is coming up in the next shloka, where Krishna gives a very, very beautiful analogy about how this knowledge works. And we will see that in the next one. Yathai dhamsi samit dognihi. Yathai dhamsi samit dognihi. Bhasmasat kuruterjuna. Bhasmasat kuruterjuna. Jnanagni sarvakarmani. Jnanagni sarvakarmani. Bhasmasat kurute tatha. Bhasmasat kurute tatha. Yathai dhamsi samidhoknihi. Bhasmasat kuruterjuna. Jnanagni sarvakarmani. Bhasmasat kurute tatha. So he's saying that, when a fire is there and how it burns wood so easily, okay, how the wood is completely turned to ashes, bhasmasat kurute, O Arjuna, so too this knowledge, if I have this knowledge and if I've understood the knowledge for what it means, it can reduce all my actions in the same way. So that doesn't mean that, somebody has to totally run away from action or something like that. That's not what he's trying to show here. All he's trying to say here is that ultimately it is only this knowledge in which all actions can be totally dissolved. And that is, we have given this example before about the roasted seeds, right? How once the seeds are totally roasted, it is never going to germinate. It's never going to sprout. No more karmas are going to come out of it. And so too, this knowledge is such that anything and everything can be, it can burn away all our vasanas. Ultimately here, so the actions when he talks about, it is the vasanas that are totally burnt out, just like how the fire burns all the wood. So ultimately what he's giving here is the glory of this knowledge. And this glory of the knowledge is even this ego can be completely dissolved once I understand that once I understand the true knowledge of this. So with that, I'll just chant Shloka number 38 and we will look at it later. Nahi jnanena sadrisham, nahi jnanena sadrisham, pavitram iha vidyate, pavitram iha vidyate, tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha, tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha, kale natmani vindati, kale natmani vindati, nahi jnanena sadrisham, pavitramiha vidyate, tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha, kale natmani vindati. So here he's trying to show that ultimately the best purifier is this knowledge. I gave that Shloka Kurute Ganga Sagara Gamanam Vrata Paripalanam Matava Danam Jnana Vihina Sarvamatena. What is it last line? Bhajatina Muktim Janma Shatena. That's the Bhajagovindam Shloka. So ultimately trying to say that this knowledge ultimately is the best purifier. So with that, we'll stop here and we'll meet next week and we will finish the chapter most likely next week. And if we have time, we will do that comparison of the third and the fourth shlokas also. And if you have done your homework and you've been able to compare, that'll be great too. Would love to hear from you as well. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate. Purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you, everyone. I don't know if the power went off slightly, and I don't know if that affected it. Let me stop the live stream. Sorry, one second.